Welcome to Module 7, where we explore rest as the joyful alternative to traditional retirement. And probably all of you need this slide and this module more than maybe any of the other ones. The concept of retirement started, well, not until the 19th century. Before that, there really was no such thing as retirement. You just worked until you passed away. Then a few people had pensions in the early 19th century. Then Social Security came into the picture. Then we had a few more pensions, then 401ks. And so, what does it look like today? Well, what happened is that many of our parents, and when I say our, I mean I'm a Gen Xer, our parents often did have pensions. And while they're not perfect and they don't help everyone, the combination of pensions plus Social Security more or less worked so that people could retire. But then some issues started happening. One, Social Security, okay? It was not designed to support people for 30 years. When Social Security came out in 1935, the average lifespan was 61.9 years. Now it's 78.8. So if you can get Social Security at 62, and then you're living to be 78, or in many cases, people are living to be 95 to over 100. That's many, many years that the government did not expect to have to pay you. And so that's why we have the Social Security issue where the system, could fail, and we're trying to figure out ways to fix it through a combination of new laws and different tax dollars going different places. Will it be fixed? I don't know. I'm not here to talk about whether or not Social Security will get fixed, but I am here to talk about what you can do about it. For one, I just don't always have my clients count on it. It's not that it won't be there at all, it's just that we don't know exactly how much it will be, and it will probably be a small part of your plan. And then until recently, a lot of us had pensions. And when 401ks became more popular, employers realized that 401ks were a lot less expensive than pensions. And that happened mostly for us, the Gen Xer generation. And so we're this experiment where no one ever taught us how to use 401ks because our parents didn't have them. And yet we don't have pensions. And so we're supposed to just know that we're supposed to save for retirement. And most people have not done that. They've done a little, but more than half of Gen Xers are not anywhere close to being as prepared as they need to be for retirement. So is that a little bit depressing? Sure. But at the same time, Gen Xers are resilient, and we're going to talk about solutions. And so, just in case you're wondering, well, gosh, how much should I be saving? If you're 35, you should have saved about 1.5 to 2 times the amount of your gross salary in a savings account. I mean, I say should, as in if you want to have a traditional retirement, retiring at age 65. Age 45, you should have 3 to 4 times if you want a more traditional retirement. And then by 55, you should have already saved 8 to 10 times your salary. Now, of course, there's lots and lots of different variables that impact this, such as how many different multiple streams of income do you have? Are you going to keep working in an encore career in retirement? And do you think you'll have a much higher cost of living or lower cost of living or about the same? And these are all different things that we can explore in this module. But first of all, let's talk about the myth of retirement bliss, because a lot of people think that retirement is going to be this wonderful thing, and it gets glorified, like, oh, in fact, it's so glorified that people have this fire movement, financial independence, retire early. But in reality, a lot of people have a loss of purpose and routine. They don't know what to do because they're no longer in their everyday community. They sometimes have financial stress, especially if they retire too early. And then a lot of the blue zone or health span studies, they talk about how it's actually not that great on your health to retire early, especially if you no longer have purpose. And that by not retiring and by keeping really busy and active, you're healthy longer anyway. So, do we all need to put so much emphasis on retirement? That's a big question that this module explores. Another thing to consider is that with service-driven professionals in particular, there is a burnout epidemic. This is not new. It's always been hard to work as a social worker or a teacher or in medicine. Sure, there's lots of rewards, but it's just hard. It's emotionally hard. It can be physically hard. And burnout is huge. I don't think I need to go into this too deep. You all know the statistics and you know how it feels. And so it's gotten even worse since the pandemic for a lot of professions. So, what do we do about burnout? That's also what this module explores. And then another kind of interesting study is that happiness actually increases the most just in the first year of retirement. And now that is assuming that you're financially secure. And oftentimes in your first year of retirement, you are financially secure. You've at least saved up enough money for the first year. And so that's when it feels like a real party and everyone's excited and you feel great because you have this freedom and maybe you feel like you have a weight released. But then after that, the happiness starts to wear off. So when we think about all of those three things combined, that we don't quite have, most of us don't have enough for retirement anyways. Retirement might not be that great for us, but if we do retire, you get the most benefit in the first year. Well, this leads to a case for sabbaticals. So what exactly is a sabbatical? I mean, there are, some people have more technical definitions of sabbaticals, like it has to be maybe a paid leave of absence, but sabbatical really just means a time to rest. And, in lots of other cultures and countries, sabbaticals are more common. Of course, in the US, they're less common. It's hard for us to even get a real week of vacation sometimes. But for service-driven professionals, I'd like to make the case that they're absolutely essential and that the use of sabbaticals is a great alternative to traditional retirement and burnout, and just overall can help you be happier, more focused, and actually be more productive for a longer amount of time. So basically, when you take time off, your brain just has time to be creative. When you are no longer have all the stress coming at you, your brain changes. In fact, what's crazy is your brain can change in 7 days from just not having all those stress hormones flooding it. And of course, that not only fixes your brain when you're less stressed, it also fixes your body. And so you have improved mental health, which of course then also improves your physical health. And then you can also have stronger relationships. So even though we talked about how when you retire, you might lose those workplace relationships, oftentimes a sabbatical is a little different. In a sabbatical, maybe you're either spending more time with people you love, or you're going somewhere to meet new people that you have similar interests with, or sometimes in a sabbatical, you're volunteering and you're meeting new people as well. And so whatever you decide to do in your sabbatical, you're often getting stronger relationships. Sometimes that stronger relationship is even just with yourself. Maybe you just need to do inner work in your sabbatical, and that's the relationship that needs the most focus. Speaking of professional development and personal development, a lot of times during our normal lives, we don't have time to go deep and we don't have time to take that meditation retreat or learn a new instrument or whatever it is that we need to do. We just don't get to it in our everyday life. And that, all of it, the benefits for your brain, your body, your spirit, all of it is just huge. And sometimes it just doesn't work trying to do that stuff to just cram it in on the weekend. And for me, I took a sabbatical essentially. Actually, at the time, I didn't consider it a sabbatical, but I didn't travel for my sabbatical. I just learned Brazilian dance in Denver. And it was absolutely a life-changing experience that helped all of those things: brain, body, spirit. I mean, learning dance and choreography is one of the most challenging things I've ever done in my life by far. And it was exactly what my body needed. And now I feel like as a result of that experience, now that I'm back in finance and back into, the everyday grind, so to speak, I have so much more creativity that I bring to the table as a result of that sabbatical experience. And I also have more job satisfaction, even though I'm self-employed. And it's what I do every day for a living, financial planning. I'm engaged, and because I'm doing it my way. I'm doing it my way because I was able to see how to do it because of the sabbatical. And so, did the sabbatical affect my retirement? Well, yes, right? I mean, because I had to spend my own money to be on sabbatical, to take a break. And so that's what we need to save for. We've got to save for how can we save for a sabbatical? How can we make that happen? So basically, this really puts the joy in the joy of intentional income. Saving for sabbaticals means that you will have to put money aside, and you'll have to save it a little bit differently than how you save for retirement. Part of it might just be saving more money, but not necessarily. It just depends on your overall strategy for retirement. And so some of you might want to have a sabbatical and still retire early. But I'm also suggesting that some of us might not have to retire as early due to the health benefits of sabbaticals. And so anything that you're going to put in a short-term savings account, remember, anything that's 0 to 5 years, this is a review from time diversification. You want that in a high interest savings account, at least for now. Right now, high interest savings account, this is May 2024, are getting about 5.1 to 5.5% if you get a good online savings account. And so that's a great opportunity for you to be able to save without any downside risk. And the reason you remember, the reason you want that in that bucket where you don't have that downside risk is because the stock market can go up and down quite a bit in a 5-year period. And so, but earning about 5% is wonderful. And that's a great way to build that savings as you're saving for your sabbatical. And then you may also need to save for your future sabbaticals. Your next sabbatical, maybe your next one is within the 0 to 5 years, but then you also want to have your bucket of saving for your sabbatical that maybe you're taking a big one in 10 years. And so that could be a mixture of stocks, bonds, bond funds, stock funds. I have not talked a lot about bonds yet. And so I just want to give you a couple examples of what bonds look like, or I guess how they act. And part of that is T-bills. T-bills is a very short-term bond. You have municipal bonds. They have some tax advantages. If you're in a really high tax bracket, those can be great. I bonds are really good for keeping up with inflation. And then corporate bonds are also wonderful. They can give you a little bit higher returns sometimes. And then just in general, you can have some short-term bond funds. One method to make going on sabbaticals easier is when you have multiple streams of income. That way you don't have to necessarily save up and take money from, say, money that would otherwise be saved for retirement to go on a sabbatical. You can just use multiple streams of income from a business that you were able to, say, walk away from, or maybe you have a business that you mostly have on autopilot where maybe you only have to work, oh, I don't know, 4 to 5 hours a week, and you've walked away from a different main position for your sabbatical. In many cases, you could probably still have a sabbatical be more or less a true sabbatical if you only had to work, say, 4 hours a week. Now, keep in mind, of course, it takes a long time to get a business to the point where you're only working 4 hours a week. But as long as you start early and you start thinking about those different passive income streams early, it can be really helpful. Or if you have a rental property or two that can provide income, extra income while you're on your sabbatical. So a lot of it is just getting creative with getting these different passive income streams. And when you get older, for example, after you've had money in the stock market for a long time, that's also that additional source of passive income. So a combination of business income, rental property income, and stock income and bond income, all of those different income streams combined can allow you to live while you're on your sabbatical. One other thought about career planning and just this concept of, do you really need to retire early? And the thing is, if you really enjoy what you do and you're living a service-driven life, you might not want to retire early. And so maybe what you really need to do is just start enjoying your career more now. If you're service driven and you're doing a service driven career, you probably already know it's important, but you maybe are just tired. And so, how can you just do a little less? How can you set a few more boundaries? One of my favorite books is by Kate Northrup, Do Less. It's a great read. It has lots of really interesting studies about how your productivity it just tanks. as you work and work and go beyond about, 35 hours a week. And of course, that's different for all people, but it's clearly, the amount of work that we do in our culture in the United States is just tends to be way beyond what is ideal for optimal productivity. So, and that's why a lot of times people feel just disengaged because we're just spending too much time working when really a lot of time that we're at work, we're just not mentally engaged because we're just at the workplace for too many hours. And so by building in just more balance, which again takes time. I'm not going to pretend like I have easy solutions for balance. It's taken me 20 years to feel somewhat balanced. And that's why I'm making this course, is to hope that you guys can maybe not have it take 20 years, because yeah, I think a lot of people can get there a little faster. And that's also, I think, a lot of, Gen Z and millennials are better at, is they're better at not being such crazy workaholics that a lot of us Gen Xers are. So nice job, Gen Z. So one thing that I noticed about service-driven professionals was when I met Lee Hartwell, and he is a Nobel laureate, and he's the only Nobel laureate I know and the only Nobel laureate I've worked with. But getting to know him for a summer and work with him for a summer was really eye-opening. I expected to learn science from him. He was famous for cancer research he did with yeast cells and how yeast cells are similar to human cells, and so we were able to learn a lot from him about cancer. But what I really learned from him is the way he thinks, and really just, how are Nobel laureates different from the rest of us. And I guess the first thing I noticed about him is, wow, is he a good listener? I mean, his ability to listen was off the charts. But then the other thing I noticed is that he is a true service driven human, or a purpose driven human. He was going from being the president of Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, and he was getting ready to retire from that. And I think he was about 80 when I met him, maybe not quite 80. He could have just, sat on the beach, right? And instead, he was going into science education and sustainability. He was going into sustainability education and how to make it better. And so he was just completely shifting fields into something brand new when he could just retire. And that really made me think, wow, he doesn't want to retire. And then I started noticing that more as I met really service driven people, they tend to not always want to retire, especially if they've managed to avoid burnout. And that's where I thought again, like a lot of people, if they just could take these longer sabbaticals, where, maybe at first it's just a week. Okay, for if you're younger, take a real true sabbatical. And maybe that sabbatical is just sitting in your house. You don't have to go on some wild trip to spend a bunch of money. Maybe you just need to read or do yoga or do a juice fast. I mean, you don't have to go to Europe or something big. It can just be whatever your body and mind and spirit needs. But just to have these sabbaticals and go longer and longer and longer, knowing that if you stay healthy, you may turn out like Lee Hartwell, where you're not really wanting to retire and you just keep going. Now, to be clear, I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't plan to retire at all, because not everyone is able to keep going like Lee Hartwell. A lot of people get sick and have either mental conditions or physical conditions where they are no longer able to work. So keep that in mind. You still want to save for retirement, but it's that the longer you can keep your body and mind healthy, such as keeping it healthy through sabbaticals, the longer you can work and the more you'll be able to make an impact. And then you'll actually end up needing a little bit less in retirement, anyways, if you're still working. Let's start now. This is the fun part. What kind of sabbatical do you need? Let's start thinking about it. How do you want to feel? What will you eat? Who will you be with? How will you move your body? What does your soul need, and what will you learn? Take some time. Write this down. Once you've had time to figure out your vision and go back to that last slide if needed, I want you to start by just putting your sabbatical on the calendar. Pick a week and do it. Start with 1 week. Then email your employer. If you're self-employed, there you go. That's easy. Done. And then open the high interest savings account if you don't already have one open from the other modules, and start saving for that fund, for the sabbatical fund. I'm pretty sure that you're going to be more motivated to save for a sabbatical fund than you will to do some of the other categories that are not as in line with your values. Have fun and let me know if you have questions.